They'll strap you into the drop ship soon, strap you in like cargo, trussed up and immobilized, completely helpless. Arms, legs, everything, you can't even move your head side to side. And then they just leave you there for an hour, 2 hours, while the troop transport maneuvers into position. Launch window is often only a couple of seconds, so when those bastards in the Navy are finally finished dancing about, they need every single drop ship ready to go. No warning, no second thoughts, no last-minute toilet break. Well, if you didn't go before you got strapped in, you'll probably piss yourself on the way down anyway. No one I know has ever made landfall with a full bladder. And sure, you've got an emergency release button just under your fingertips, but you can't help but wonder, what if I can't get the cover off the button? Or what if we're hit and a piece of shrapnel goes through the release and I'm just stuck there, trapped as the drop ship burns? But then you remind yourself that if your drop ship gets hit, the chances of anyone living long enough to burn to death are just this side of zero. When a drop ship that's screaming down through the atmosphere at several thousand kilometers an hour gets hit, the effect is generally like smashing a metal piñata filled with chunks of meat. They don't tell you about that part in basic training, how often around a landing zone you'll get burning bits of marine raining out of the sky like someone's airdropping barbecue. Have I whetted your appetite? Don't worry, if you're feeling queasy, the drop ship's the best place for you. No one's going to notice another marine vomiting. They'll be calling us soon. Word of advice, take everything you learn from the simulations and forget it. Simulations are nothing like a real combat drop. Oh, they shake you about a bit in the sims, but in the real thing, we'll be bouncing around so much someone will probably break something before we even make landfall. Hence the straps. That's another thing that isn't the same in training. At boot camp, they always leave you a bit of give. In the real thing, you're cinched up so tight it would cut off the blood supply if it wasn't for your power armor. Anything less and the whiplash would snap your neck. Had that happen once on my second drop. Navy tech was a little lazy, just a little, and left enough slack for the strap to come loose when we hit atmosphere. Poor guy was internally decapitated, if you know what that means. You don't? Probably for the best. And all that's before you even make landfall. The hatch opens, the straps release, that's when the real fun begins. And by fun, I mean some alien starts trying to turn your insides into outsides, if the drop hasn't already done that for him, of course. It's also the moment you get to start fighting back. I've fought more or less every kind of alien the galaxy has to offer. Things that look almost like us, and things that look like an octopus had unnatural relations with a lobster. Also fought a few humans in my time, although taking out a few pirates isn't really much to boast about, in my opinion. Most of them didn't even have power armor. You know what I learned from all that? Everything dies. Sometimes it takes a while, a whole lot of ammo, and a whole lot of guts, but everything dies. Your job is to make sure it's them rather than you. So when you're down there, just remember that the bastard shooting at you has just as much reason to duck as you do. That's 4 million credits worth of technology that you're wearing, and while I'm sure the supplier is overcharging given that it's military, it's the very best in combat hardware. I could put a 10-year-old in it and he'd be able to level half a city block. And you got through boot camp, so I'm going to assume that you're most likely at least as smart as a 10-year-old. Probably. And if you forget everything else, just point your guns towards the enemy and shoot. If you can do that much when the bombs are falling and the plasma bolts are singing the air all around you, then you can't go too far wrong. You know, just so long as you make sure there's none of our guys between you and the enemy when you pull the trigger. The drop zone will be the hardest part. I've had a few uncontested landings, but most of the time, the enemy knows we're coming, and they're not stupid enough to let us get boots on the ground without making us pay for the privilege. We're at our most vulnerable during the drop, and they take full advantage of that. The landing zone will be hell, screaming bloody fiery hell. But as someone once said, if you're going through hell, keep going. Once the beachhead is established and we start to push out into the enemy positions, it'll get easier. Just don't freeze up and don't try to run, because there's no place to go. If it helps, pretend it's just another training simulation, and remember what we're fighting for. What are we fighting for? Hell if I know. I'm just a corporal, but I'm sure if you asked an officer nicely, they'd tell you. I may not know what this planet is or why it matters. I'm sure as hell not fighting so I can play Little House on the Prairie on it afterwards. Ain't fighting so someone will give me a parade afterwards. Some of the boys live for the fame and glory part, but I'm just trying to make sure I get home safe and all the dumbass jarheads around me do the same. Another tour or two and you'll care about these idiots more than you do your own family. Military is funny like that. But I digress. I may not know much about this planet, but I can tell you that the aliens currently squatting on it are the kind of ETs we want to keep as far from Earth as possible. I guess that's why most of us are fighting in the end, to go back home and to make sure there's a home to go back to. Who's the enemy? Boy, did you sleep through the briefings? Alright, I guess they were kind of dull. Well, the aliens down there are what we commonly call headlights. That's not their actual name, of course. A human would need to be able to poke their tongue out their nose to pronounce that. We call them that because it's about as close as we can get and because they have little lights on their heads. Biolumi what's it? Luminescence. Luminescence. Yeah, that's it. Bioluminescence. Now, the headlights, they're as mean a bunch of ETs as you'll ever find. I don't know who this planet belonged to before, but if they were smart, they got off before the headlights arrived. Mission briefing said there were no civilians down there, so let's hope so, right? Like I said, I've fought against just about every kind of alien known to man, and they run the gamut from soldiers not so different from you and me to absolute bastards who will murder anyone they can get their hands on. And that's if they're feeling generous. Headlights are the latter sort. So believe you me, if you get a chance to kill one, don't hesitate, because mercy is not in their vocabulary. Literally. I think the closest translation they have is, mental weakness. Another good reason to pay attention during the mission briefings, by the way. Always helps to know whether you can surrender or not. Not that we have any intention of surrendering, of course. We're Marines of the United States of Earth. But just between you and me, if it comes to that, being a dead hero isn't all it's cracked up to be. I've known a couple, and let me tell you, none of them have ever recommended it to me. Oh, people say things like, it's the way he would have wanted to go, but no one knows a Marine like the guys he served with. And I'd say they'd have rather been welcomed back to Earth with a family barbecue and a keg of beer than the metal that got pinned to the coffin when it was unloaded at Cape Canaveral. Do your duty, kid, but don't try to be a hero. You're already all the hero you need to be just by being here. Say, you're looking a little pale there. Hope I haven't put you off your game. After all, it's a bit late for second thoughts now, isn't it? They'll be calling us to the drop ships any moment. Don't worry, remember your training, don't panic, and you'll probably get through it. It's a tough job, but someone's got to do it. Why does it have to be us? Kid, I've been asking myself the same question for 10 years. You know, when humans first left the solar system, they thought there'd be all kinds of amazing things out here. Ancient civilizations, cosmic mysteries, beings so advanced that they might as well be gods, beings who were free from hatred, violence, and war, who could teach us how to be free of them as well. Well, if there is anyone like that in the galaxy, they've got the good sense not to show themselves to the rest of us. You know what those early explorers found instead? People. Oh, some of them were smarter than us, some of them were dumber than us too. Some of them were nicer, some of them were meaner, some of them were richer, some of them were poorer, and some of them were just plain weird. But when you got right down to it, they were still just people with a bunch of flaws just like us. There's no ultimate justice in the universe. Well, not in this one at least. I'm not a padre, so I can't comment on what comes after this life. There's just people muddling through as best they can. When the headlights or the sucker chucks or the Vossen start causing trouble, there's no supreme being who's going to come along and put them in timeout for being naughty. There's just us. You know, none of the other species that made it into space thought they'd find some kind of ancient super race ready to set everything to rights. They got out here and found it was just the same kind of hard-knock life they'd evolved in, and they were like, yeah, makes sense, because of course it does. Why would you expect all the rules to change in space? I guess that's one thing that makes humans different from all the other species. We made it into space, and we were disappointed. We thought there was supposed to be some justice in the universe, not just a whole lot of innocent people getting screwed over, same as usual. And that's why it's got to be us. Because if you're a real human being, then you have to believe that someone should do something when there's an alien empire going around conquering and enslaving people. And since no one else is going to do it, well, then that just leaves you and me. Why us specifically? Because we're Marines, kid. I was born with steel in my heart and napalm in my blood, and the government trained me how to use that to the betterment of mankind and all right-thinking species. Which, I assure you, was not what I originally had in mind when I was a dumb teenager like you. But I could have done worse. You have the training, you have the weapons. You're going to go down to that planet, and you're going to make those ET bastards regret that of all the species in all the galaxy, they picked a fight with humans. Now, what do you say? Are you ready to kick some alien ass? Yeah, aura, and all that jazz. Now get your suit locked and loaded because the boarding light just came on. You're in for one hell of a ride, kid. There ain't nothing in the universe like being a Marine on drop day. Just remember, when things have gone to hell and you're wondering what the hell you signed up for, don't panic. You can't set the whole universe to rights, but you can blow up the bastard shooting at you, and the one after that, and the one after that, until the galaxy is a slightly better place than when you started. You're a human being and a goddamn Marine, and if the enemy ain't more afraid of you than you are of him, it's your job to teach him why he should be.